begin. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, esteemed participants. My name is Hilmi, and I'm GIPA's head of Indonesia. So, two rules before we start the Zoom participants. Please keep your mic muted throughout the session. If you'd like to ask a question, we have a Q&A box. If time permits, the moderator will then give you access to ask the questions, live with your video on and audio on. Feel free to record and take pictures throughout the session. We are also broadcasting live through Facebook. To those of us joining us through Facebook, welcome. Tonight we have four wonderful speakers who've kindly made time to be on our webinar. Spelman from the World Economic Forum, Handry Satriago from General Electric, Dewi Wahab from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Indonesia, and Arcky, GIPA's head of Americas from American Express. To the speakers, you are speaking to a live audience of so far 400 registered individuals, mostly in Indonesia, the US, the UK, but with viewers from as far as Qatar and Kuwait. Now, around 90 of us will be joining us through Zoom, and the rest will be joining through Facebook Livecast. To those of you joining through Facebook Livecast, our Secretary General Wijaya will be taking care of you. So tonight's session will be moderated by Stephen. A brief background on Stephen. Stephen Marcelino is the chairman of the Global Indonesia Professional Association, GIPA, who drives our strategic partnership to promote business and investment links. Now, he took up this role after co-founding the Indonesian Professional Hub in the UK called IPA-NY, where he was executive director between 2015 and 2020. He represented Diaspora and professionals at global events and conferences. Currently, Stephen is ASEAN Capital Market Director at Accenture UK, a global management consulting firm where he promotes financial market development across Southeast Asia, working with FS regulators to allow member states to draw more capital to accelerate infrastructure development. He also doubles down on facilitating inward investment from institutional investors and business leaders to Indonesia. Now, prior to Accenture, Stephen worked in Prime Brokerage Division at UBS Investment Bank, London office. Now, without further delay, please allow me to welcome our moderator for this evening's session, GIPA's Chairman, Stephen Marcelino. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hilmi, for a kind introduction. It's our great pleasure to be joined by over 400 professionals, executives, academicians. Last time I was told, it was from over 75 leading cities across 30 countries around the world. So allow me to say good evening those in Jakarta, joining us live either Zoom or Facebook, and across Asia Pacific region. Good afternoon for those who are with me in London. It is glorious weather. We are blessed with this amidst the lockdown. We're going to make it a little bit bearable, which is nice. And also very good morning to those in New York and across the Americas region, North America, Canada, and so on. It's great that everyone can tune in at today's Global Connect series. Global Connect series aims to bring the latest global insights, global perspectives, as well as leading industry perspectives into Indonesians back home, as well as those in respective professional hubs overseas. And today, we are privileged to be joined with an amazing lineup of speakers. But before introducing our great speakers, allow me to probably welcome a few people, as well as share a little bit of GIPA, because when I look through the list of attendees via Eventbrite, there are some people who perhaps not very familiar with us, or perhaps some new members of respective hubs. So allow me to introduce GIPA. So firstly, special welcome to Ibu Dewi Wahab, Special Advisor to the Indonesia Foreign Ministry for Socio-Cultural and Diaspora Matters, as well as some representative from Kemlu. Special welcome to staff and senior representative from embassies and consulate generals from London, from New York, San Francisco, Brussels, Beijing, and all across geographies that I cannot name by one. Welcome to special representative from Bank Indonesia at international offices such as London and other geographies, IIPC or BKPM as well. Also special welcome to a representative from over 12 Indonesia's ministries and agencies who are also tuning from there. We're pleased that you can also tune in and also hear global insights from our great speakers today. Right, GIPA. So allow me to share a few words about GIPA. GIPA aims to promote business and investment links overseas through highly talented professionals and executives across G20 and ASEAN market. We aim to be a true partner for Indonesia economic diplomacy from the private sector side. We have been supporting various professional hubs, as well as been encouraging a number of geographies to have their own professional hubs, and all connected and supported by us in the Global Secretariat at GIPA. Now, without further ado, I believe this is a time for us to kind of enter to today's Global Connect series session. So allow me to, perhaps the rule of the game today is that I'll be asking respective speakers to share their perspective, and then we're going to enter a Q&A discussion for a bit. So for those of you who are in Zoom, please think about some burning questions you have, even some tough questions, because we have amazing speakers today around the topic of the future of the workforce in post-COVID-19 world. Those on Facebook, you can also ask questions where Stephen Vijay, our Secretary General, will be looking after all of your questions if there is one. Now, perhaps to start with, our first speakers for today, Global Connect series, the future of the workforce, post-COVID-19 world. We have Mark Spelman, who is the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Future of Digital Society and Economics Initiative. Mark is an international business leader who has worked for Accenture for over 26 years. He's our alumni, very proud, and this weekend is his wedding anniversary weekend with a beloved wife, so it's great that he's taking a bit of time to spend with us, sharing his view. He was also at Accenture, he was the global head of strategy, and he was the global thought leadership and executive director for Accenture Institute for High Performance. His current roles include working for the World Economic Forum to lead their initiative on the future of the digital economy and society. Mark, over to you.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed, and a warm welcome to everybody. Let me try and share with you a few thoughts around workforces, but also sort of recognizing that all of you are leaders in your own particular right. And what I like to do when I think about leadership is to talk at three levels. One is at the macro level in terms of understanding some critical trends. Two is at the micro level, what's happening at the level of the firm, but also at the personal level. And that's a structure that I find very helpful to sort of use, so macro, micro, and personal. So let me make some introductory comments. The first one that I want you to sort of bear in mind is, as we think about workforces, the world economically is more and more global, but politically is more and more local. And so a lot of the dynamics that we see around workforces are this global local dynamic and how that works in practice. And if you then put that into a COVID-19 situation, I believe that the two key words that you should be really thinking about, and it varies a lot depending on the industry that you're working in, is resilience on one side and innovation on the other. So in some cases, in certain industries, you're in lockdown, not able to work, not able to produce anything. And so a lot of the questions are around how do you make that business resilient? How is it going to sort of survive going forward? And a lot of the focus there is around sort of customers, it's around cost management, it's about cash, and it's about the sorts of investments that you're going to make. But I think that the world is actually sort of partly about resilience, but it's also about innovation. And one of my interesting observations about leadership is that the really good leaders are excellent at Horizon 2. And what I mean by that is that they're not totally caught up in the short term, i.e. now, and they're not totally caught up by the long term and by the big trends of the future, but they're actually able to manage Horizon 2. And I think one of the real tricks going forward with managing the workforce is being able to look at multiple time horizons. So that's my first sort of key point. It's about thinking about workforce in the context of resilience and innovation. My second key message would be, I think that what we're seeing is increasingly decentralization taking place. And actually COVID-19 is going to only accelerate that trend, because part of the politicization of COVID-19 is going to be more and more national boundaries are going to go up. That means outsourcing is going to become, I think, more difficult. And with technology, particularly with things like 5G, industrial internet, we're going to see more decentralization of production, particularly manufacturing, more localization of that, and therefore leadership is going to be more at the edge. And so what we need to think about is, what does that mean for us in terms of the way that we run our workforces, when I think you're going to have more decentralization, more ecosystems, more networks, more partnerships taking place. And so one of my key messages to you is, you've got to think about the organization beyond the four walls of the building today. It's actually much more an ecosystem mode. The third thought I would just give you is that as we look at talent, then we need to think that as we go forward, actually we're going to be long on certain skills and short on others. And we are going to have very effective talent strategies going forward. And so how we manage that, I think, is going to be a critical prerequisite. But we're also moving to a world where it is going to be a lot more data intensive, data rich. And one of the key things I think that is going to be very interesting to watch is how businesses make decisions going forward. And if you think about the way that we've made decisions in the past, a lot of it was about historic data, but in fact the trend is towards real-time information, data-driven. So we've got talent, data-driven, which is going to be, I think, very important. And what I would just sort of say to all of you is that I hope you will go away from this thinking it's not all about technology, because what I would say to each one of you is, what really matters in today and tomorrow's world is, how do you stay relevant? And are you exhibiting the sort of behaviors that will enable not only you to be relevant, but how do you sort of, I think, develop your own leadership style in an authentic way. So a few points about the macro scene as I see it. That relates, I think, to what's actually happening in the world of the organization in which you operate in. And for me, the sort of the dimensions to think about are, well, what is actually happening to jobs? And clearly what we're going to see coming through COVID-19 is a combination of certain jobs getting sort of destroyed, other jobs getting created. But the thing that I want you to think about is that I think what is fundamentally changing is that whilst there will be some elements of job creation and job destruction, actually I think it is elements of work and elements of activity within jobs which are going to change. And the thought that I'd like you to particularly focus on is that what AI, what more technology is going to do is make diagnostic works more easy. So if you take a law firm, what increasingly you're finding is that you're able to do more and more sort of the diagnostic casework using artificial intelligence, using technologies. So in fact, what you're actually seeing is that in a law firm, an accountancy firm, professional services firms, you're going to need a bunch of technologists working alongside the practitioners. And so what is happening is that diagnostic is increasingly moving towards technology, but solutioning is where you're using the distinctive human expertise. And so I think this thing about how jobs are changing over time, the nature of work is going to be very important. And that leads you into skills. And so the key question about how you stay relevant in skills is that it isn't all about technology skills, and it isn't all about emotional intelligence and soft skills, but it's about how you bring the two together. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic about sort of what is the skill mix that we need going forward. And that comes back to my talent strategies. So I think that what we need to be thinking about in terms of the future of work and the future of the workforce is the decomposition of jobs, the reintegration of those jobs, the skill balance that you need. And then, of course, the real question is, I think that our workforces, the talent within those, are our hidden jewels. How do we make sure that we protect them? How do you help the workforce perhaps to relearn, learn new things, develop new things? And my key message here is that this isn't all about lifelong learning. It's about how do you learn at 10 and do it 2. So this is about the combination of how do you help people to stay relevant, to keep on growing, to keep on learning, but at the same time do it in a micro way as well as in a sort of more longer term formal basis. So I think as you think about the future of workforces, you need to think about the jobs and how they're changing, the nature of work, the skills that you need, and then what does that mean, I think, in terms of the type of training. And I'd like to just finish by making one or two sort of personal comments which impact you as a leader, because actually COVID-19 won't change some of your core thoughts, I think, about leadership. They might reinforce certain things. But if I was really thinking about leadership and what is going to be very important, the way that we are, one of the problems with leadership today is the narratives are very poor. And what that is because leadership needs to be able to explain context, it needs to handle complexity, it needs to deal with ambiguity. So I would ask each one of you, what are your 10 stories? What are the 10 stories that you can tell which help to explain how we as a business can do things better? So learn to be a good storyteller. That's going to be very important because of all the complexities with COVID-19 and how we come out. Be a good storyteller. That would be my first sort of key message. The second one is just reinforcing this fact about the really good leaders understand it's about technology, but it's also about humans. So one of the things that's been very interesting to watch what's happened through COVID-19, through the Zooms and all the rest of it, is that the professional personal boundaries have blurred. Because for the first time, as we see on this Zoom conference, you get a chance to look into my study, into my bedroom, into my living room, wherever I'm doing the conference from. Personal and professional boundaries get blurred. So the question becomes, how do we, if you like, help people who perhaps have difficulties, if you're a dual career marriage, being able to sort of work from home? How do we help people with that? That's the personal side. And how do we leverage technology? And I would say if we overemphasize technology and underemphasize the personal side, we'll get it wrong. And if we overemphasize the personal and miss out on some of the technology developments, I also think that's a problem. I do think values and ethics will continue to be an important issue. And I just sort of end up by saying, I think the leaders of the future who really understand what the post-COVID world is going to be all about, particularly if you go back to my points about resilience and innovation, are the ones who understand the word potential. Find the really great people in your organization and help develop their potential. And you as a leader, I think, need, particularly going forward, to be extremely versatile. And one of the things I always sort of look for when I look at sort of the leaders of the future is their ability to what I call change gear. That's their ability to actually go up and crank up, move harder, faster, quicker when things are tough. And it's that ability to be able to both recognize potential and also to be versatile and to bring people with you. And that aspirational culture is what is going to be at the heart, I believe, of being able to drive workforces forward. So I think, Stephen, there's probably enough there from me. We can come back with more questions and answers. But what I'd like perhaps everybody just to remember is always, as a leader, think about that macro, the micro, and the personal. Can you bring it all together? I put some notes together as part of the brief for this, but I hope that there's some thoughts there. And the people who are able to navigate the macro, the micro, and at the same time be genuinely authentic, I think will be the great leaders of the future. Thank you, Stephen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your perspective. And then we're moving on to our own head of America's region at GIPA, Arcky, who's also the Director of Strategic Initiative and Model Governance at Amex, American Express. Arcky is responsible for covering GIPA's outreach in the Americas region and for spearheading Center of Excellence on Career Development. He also co-founded and leads the Indonesia Professional Association in New York since 2017. Arcky currently works as the director at Amex. His work mainly covers special projects pertaining to risk, performing research on current and upcoming risk trends, providing insights and recommendations to the senior management. Furthermore, Arcky also managed the company's quantitative and artificial intelligence model governance framework. He has a doctorate in economic geography and international business with research emphasis on multinational services firms operating in Southeast Asia. Arcky, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. So today I would like to take the audience with regards to how the Indonesian professionals, both in the US and the United States, are facing. I would like to take you guys with regards to the challenges and also some of the emerging themes that we've observed from various communities. So I have 3 topics to discuss. One is a preliminary results of a pulse survey that we've conducted in the US and the UK to how Indonesians are facing COVID-19 in terms of career and workplace experience. 2, the emerging themes that we've seen among Indonesian communities and professionals. And lastly, I think some key advice or tips for Indonesian professionals globally on how to deal with in this type of situation. So I think first of all, I do have some materials to share through my slide here, but before that, I just want to put some orientation as well on my first topic, the pulse survey. So a few weeks ago, we shared this survey to a large number of Indonesian professionals, both across the Atlantic. And the idea is that we want to see like what they're truly experiencing in this type of situation, because it's pretty unique that Indonesian professionals overseas are often not being somewhat like visible to many others, and that's what the shine of light that we want to bring to everybody here in this discussion. So to that end, what we realize is that we have a unique finding so far, and let me share with you my screen. So COVID-19 work-related impact to Indonesian professionals in the US and UK is quite substantial based on our preliminary results. This survey is done to, this survey has been responded by about 89 professionals, both in the US and United States. So it's interesting that 90% actually felt significantly impacted in terms of their work. And let me deep dive a little bit on that. So we've bucketed the responses based on two aspects: professional life and drivers of anxiety. And why is a driver of anxiety? Studies and researchers have also proven that stress is a big factor towards work performance, and that's some angle that we want to take a look into in terms of the major concerns. So I'll begin with the first one, impacts on professional life. So in terms of this type of impact, a large number of respondents actually mentioned that they are facing short-term or flexible work arrangements. By definition, this is a change in their schedule, a change in their expected work hours, and some sort of driving the concerns on whether their company or respective workplace is going to shift in the next couple of months. But something insightful as well is that 13% of the respondents actually stated that they're experiencing redundancy or layoff, and this is quite concerning as well from our perspective, that it's not simply like we are feeling it close to home, like the friends that we know, the people that we know are experiencing this directly. And upon conducting interviews, which we also do with regards to the survey, we also seen that the first cases of redundancy and layoff are in line with the types of industry that are highly impacted by COVID-19: hospitality, airlines, tourism. But at the moment, it's slowly creeping towards other industries as well. That's going beyond the initial industry that we expect that is going to be impacted largely. Now, moving on to the drivers of anxiety, what we're seeing is that it's most of the respondents responded that 57% 57% of them are concerned that health of family and friends are a primary factor of their stress. And interview results bring in some nuance that apparently a lot of the Indonesian colleagues and friends that we have, both in the UK and the US, they're concerned that they have family members in Indonesia, and at the moment, they cannot go back to Indonesia due to various factors: limited number of flights, border closing up. Even there are some airports or airlines that requires you to have medical certification. And finally, not being able to go back to the country that they're working in, UK and the United States, because the moment you leave the country, there's a likelihood that the border may close, and or some other parts within the journey of the flight, it may be closed. And this is, they felt a little helpless because they cannot do anything about it. And fortunately, there's some sort of technology that can help to connect, but this is one of the primary concerns that Indonesian professionals are facing overseas. And an interesting part is working remotely is actually an indicator of stress as well, and anxiety. And upon interviewing some of the individuals, uh, two key important things here. One is the fact that they're concerned whether their leadership or their company can actually see that they whether they can perform effectively in the company. It's more like a what if type of question. They're not certain if whatever they're doing is actually contributing to the company because of the lack of the communication that's happening. Number two, interestingly, a lot of the Indonesian leaders in companies, the concern lies on managing direct reports. There are instances in the interviews that direct reports are expressing stress and anxiety as well. And the only thing that the Indonesian leaders and people leader here, what they can do is they can only do phone call, they can only do video call. And that's the limited amount of interaction that they can have. Where in the office, you can have an interaction directly in person, and it's more effective in terms of managing people's emotions. So I think ultimately this is an insight that's hopefully it's going to be useful for everyone in the call. We are still collecting response from both US and UK. And ultimately, I think we will, as an organization, as a community here, we plan to discuss this and probably take actions in order to how to make things better or share some valuable inputs for the community. Now I'm going to move on to the next point, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So one interesting thing that we've observed as well is the emerging positive themes among Indonesian professionals, both in the US and the United States. So this comes in twofold. One, we do see emergence of Indonesian leaders in the time of crisis, internally and both externally, internally within the company and externally within the community. So internally, there are various Indonesian professionals who, by being proactive, by coming in at the right time, they are assigned to special tasks with regards to COVID-19 and economic situation. Many of them transform into becoming an SMEs with specific topics, economic outlook, regulatory updates, epidemiology, and so on. And we've witnessed this we've witnessed a very interesting trends through the chatter across these markets. And this brings me to the second point. The second part is the external impact. The community has increased in terms of cohesiveness based on our observation. These SMEs, as a second multiplier impact from this perspective, is the fact that there's a lot of note sharing that's going on within the community. There's a lot of updates that's going on within the Indonesian community. And I think it's a very, very interesting actions that people are taking together as a community. Then this really helps in terms of sharing what's happening in the market, understanding regulatory concerns, understanding what may change or what may impact your company. And these are some things that a lot of Indonesian communities are doing. And we actually share notes across globally as well to other countries and sometimes back to Indonesia. And it's very inspiring to see that this is happening across various markets. And I thought it's some good news to share to everybody in the audience here. And finally, like something that I want to talk about is also probably some advice and tips. I do know like a lot of the audience here, maybe like over 50% are young professionals, young Indonesian professionals who are interested to hear what we're experiencing. But there are some advice, and this is something that we remind everybody. I think number one, when you're working from home, like watch yourself in terms of the workload that you do, because I think Mark mentioned there's a blur in terms of technology and people, but there's also a blur in terms of workplace and home at the moment. And I think that's something important for you to watch out. Like, I know your computer will be on all the time, so turn it off. I think it's good to take some time, don't get yourself burned out. And number two, I think it's very, very important too, if you see something useful, something important, something that's factual, and share it with your team or your leaders. I think this is a good practice that as a person, as an individual, you bring the most important positive topic that probably can add value to your company or your business. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Arcky. And I think it's certainly great that you are able to share, pulse check what the Indonesian professionals across the world, mainly in the UK and US, are really experiencing the impact. Certainly timely to hear, what Mark and, Pak Handry in a bit got to say around preparing them, out of the crisis towards the end of when we eventually come out of this. We also have Pak Handry Satriago, CEO of General Electric, with us. Pak Handry joined GE in 1997. Over the 15 years working at GE, Handry has been appointed to various positions of increasing responsibilities before finally promoted as the CEO of GE Indonesia. He's a member of the advisory boards of the several educational institutions and in a corporate university established by a state enterprise, and an active member of GE Volunteer Indonesia chapter, which has been honored with several national and international awards for its contribution to society. But Handry was also one of the greatest public speaker among Indonesia. He came to the UK and spoke to our professionals UK hubs around a couple of years ago. So it's great to welcome you back, Pak Handry, to join us, and over to you.
Thanks, Stevens. Hi, everyone. This is a very unique experience, meeting you guys again, young professionals, but I cannot see you, something that not happen every day. But, I think Mark explained beautifully in the beginning about the world that we are facing today, and that reminds me to back in 2012 when we GE realized that The more the world become global, the more local capabilities matter. So that's the first time we are trying to reach to every countries in the world and explore the local talents, explore the different way of doing business in particular countries, and get a winning not through our normal book, but having a new way of thinking which come locally and grow organically. But it is not easy, actually. So after many years, we are trying to develop the capability of local people as well as local solution. I think we are only able to create, not many countries who really become global players. And one of the countries that contribute a lot to GE but still not become global players is Indonesia. So I think what I can share with you from this session is my experience and my view from a person who play in Indonesia. Those who are playing in Indonesia and facing what is Indonesia's situation. We are trying to create a lot of localization at the time, but competitiveness become an issue. And since we are in the industrial sectors, it is not easy to just base on the local demand. But now, since we are facing the COVID-19 era, the pandemic era, I think, like Mark said, every countries are pushed to do the capability of localization. So we will see more. I think this is kind of like a blessing in disguise for Indonesia. We will see more local industries, local capabilities arise from this COVID. We need to be able to build our own ventilators, for example. We need to be able to build our own life supports for ICU room. We need to be able to create other things. So I have three messages that I would like to share today, and these three messages actually, inspired by my current CEO, chairman, and those are: number one, embrace the reality. So we have to embrace the reality, guys. This is not a kind of a virus that will be gone by summer. Because of the heat, and then the virus will be dead, and then we are, boom, back to normal. And if normal define like the world before COVID, it will be longer. So probably we will be able to bend the curve. Every countries will go to the cycle, and then they will be able to bend the curve. But before we found the vaccines and the medicine that can cure, I think we still be in the situation of the new normal. We will wear the mask to go around from our house. We probably government will ease a little bit the measures, and we can start coming to the office again. We probably can start doing traveling, but it will take some times, longer times probably, that we can do shaking hands. So the reality is we are facing an enemy that we never faced before, and that's not only related to the health situation but also to the economic situation. Recession is coming, and a lot of jobs will be gone. A lot of layoffs happen, unfortunately. But on the other side, as we always talk, when the crisis come, crisis came with the opportunities. So the second message is you need to redefine what is winning. If you use the target of 2019 and to be implemented in 2020 as a winning, I don't think that will be happen. So winning probably, like Arcky or Mark mentioned, winning probably if you are able to do something for others. Winning probably if you are collaborate with somebody from far away from Indonesia, but create an opportunity of doing online business. Winning probably if you are able to help them, the medical people who work in the first liner, and keep them safe. So a lot of winnings that you should define, and you need the creativity to do that, because again, you know, if we are talking about the theory of chaos, the theory state that the companies that can stay and able to win in this kind of chaos situation is those who are able to stay at the edge of chaos. Because at the age of chaos, you will be able to think the unthinkable. You will be able to show the handicap theory. You will be able to start questioning why not more. So, you know, stay insane is the key to be able to stay in the age of chaos. Because if you are panicked, if you lost the motivation to, and then become pessimistic, and then you cannot do anything. So redefine what is winning for you. And last one, whatever you plan, you have to execute. We cannot wait. We cannot just hope. Hope is not a strategy. Patience is not a strategy too, right? So we have to be able to execute what we plan, probably the new plan. And to be able to do that, you have to be an optimist, because by being pessimist, you will not do anything. And for me, at the end of the day, being pessimistic is not an option. So those are the messages that I have. Hopefully it can be useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Handry, for the three key messages. Certainly will resonate with many of us. I mean, the whole COVID-19 truly presents global humanitarian challenges that has been unprecedented for our lifetime. I mean, my lifetime is rather short compared to a few of us, as well as some of the economic impacts. I mean, IMF has widely been quoted to report that the world will sunk by about 3% in 2020. So the recession is upon us. We've heard from the survey that you know, some of Professional Hubs has done around the immediate impacts that professionals and many of you who are tuning in are experiencing, and we get that. And we've heard a number of perspectives from Arcky, from Mark, from Handry, around some of the things that you should be probably considering now based on some of the macro trends, micro, and what you could do today personally around some sort of attitudes, expanding skills to others. What could you do in terms of improving your understanding and how to collaborate? What sort of winning ways or winning environment you can create, and trying to define it, seizing those opportunities and plan. Now, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and I've been receiving these questions. Please keep all of these questions coming through, both from Zoom as well as from Facebook Live. And I've got a couple questions here, so I think I'm going to take a couple questions, and then I'm going to ask a question myself, if that's okay. So we have Adrian Emmanuel from We Company, based out of the US, as well as Nabil Vadir from Morgan Stanley in the UK. Do you want to just quickly ask this your question briefly, hopefully, so we can squeeze a lot more, and then we going to move on. Adrian.
Hi guys. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for the for the knowledge sharing. I'm Adrian from New York. Would like to ask in relation to the topic of the future impact of workforce, change of our work environment, and the importance of digital economy that's getting more and more prominent right now, right? What are the changes that you foresee would play a big roles in the industry that are intrinsically not digital? Specifically in like building industry, construction, that's very physical. You need to be in the location. You need to, you know, there's like a lot of coordination that can't be really done digitally. So,
thanks, Adrian. Nabil.
Yeah. So my question is more of how is working from home like affected the overall productivity of your current workforce in like each of your respective firms? And if productivity hasn't really been severely impacted, is there like a possibility for your firm to migrate to a more permanent work from home solution?
Sure. Mark, seems the first questions, do you want to take that first around digital economy and some of the less digital industries that Adrian mentioned? Perhaps also going to bring Handry as well to share some of that, because GE has certainly a conglomerate of a number of industries that may also resonate with Adrian's questions. And then I'll bring Arcky and Mark to quickly respond to the work from home arrangement from Nabil.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question about sort of building and construction. I would say if you step back and think about what is the digital economy all about, one is ubiquitous connectivity, real-time information, devices out there. And I think what's interesting is if you think of building and construction, you very quickly get to smart cities. And so actually I would argue that in fact digital is going to impact all industries. What I think is interesting, though, is that in some particularly asset-intensive industries, you will need to think quite carefully about the physical presence as well as the online presence. But if I look at some of those heavy industries, you think about mining. So what is the future of mining? Well, the answer is you don't want anyone underground. How do you use remote vehicles? How do you use robots to actually improve the quality and safety in mining? If you just take construction and smart cities, what is happening there is how do you put devices in which enable you to monitor the asset over time? We've seen one or two disasters, particularly the one in Italy where the bridge collapsed. And one of the sort of trends that I think we'll see is the ability with more sensor technology to be able to monitor the lifespan of some of the physical assets that we're seeing out there. And that will be true across the patch. So to me, I would be very careful about actually saying some industries will be digital, some will be less. I think it's more a question of timing. I think it's a question of clearly a lot of consumer-facing industries we've seen perhaps ahead of the curve. But actually, my view is that digital permeates everything. And a bit like around 2000 to 2003, when we looked at the e-commerce, if you like, e-commerce sort of boom, I think in effect, digital becomes embedded into the way that we do business, and that we won't talk about sort of digital distinctively, but it just becomes, I think, a natural part of the way that we operate. And again, I just sort of really sort of get you to think about data, and a lot of the business models are going to be about data. And the other thing I would really get you to think about is as a service. We're going to move away from a world where you actually own assets to where assets are basically used by the drink. And so, for example, a car becomes a data platform. A car becomes something that you buy by the half-hour use. I think that the ownership of assets is fundamentally going to shift, and that is part of this dynamic that we're seeing change.
Thanks, Mark. Brandon, do you want to share a few thoughts on the question?
Well, first of all, the digital, the AI, and all of those new technology will get acceleration, because of this pandemic. More and more people will use and start thinking and then creatively build something new in terms of that. But not everything can be digitalized. Not everything can be, AI, robotics, and those kind of things. In the short term, I think those infrastructure industry will be disaster. We are in aircraft engine business. I think in Indonesia, it's only 10% that airplanes still flying. Especially with the new regulation, do not go back to your village. Do not mudik. Worldwide, at least 80%. Power a lot of industry cannot work because you know, they have supply chain issues, they have logistic issues, and those kind of things. So if the industry is not working, means the power generation company also lost their big revenues, because revenues from residential normally is very small, but industry is the key. So they will lose the big chunk of their revenues. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning, you know, slowly it will come back again with the new practice with the new standard. You know, what company can do now is redefine the winning, and the winning for us probably as much as we could do helping our customers to keep doing their services and accepting the deferred payment. You know, because why we should do that? Because at the end of the day, when the economy back, when the situation get back to the normal, those who are closer with the customer will win. And that's what we are trying to do now. And I think it will be, you know, in the medium term, people will start building again, surfacing again, and when the condition normal, we will accelerate the growth of the infrastructure together with the help of the new technology like AI, robotics, digital, and so on.
Sure. Thanks for Handry. On the work from home and productivity, what sort of kind of look we should anticipate, you know, the medium term and the future? Arcky, can you share comments?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a very interesting question, Fadli, and this actually is very close to what I used to research when I was doing my doctorate. So I think there's twofold of the question, right? One is productivity when working from home. Number two is whether companies are moving permanently. So I'll answer the first one first. In terms of productivity, I think there's two ways you can look at work. One is work that you're doing because you already know the knowledge. And the other two is the type of work that generates innovation or generates business, maybe like some sort of business development. My perspective is going to be specific to services company. I think essential manufacturing and so on will remain, at least most of the primary function will remain not from home, but other auxiliary services like marketing, consulting services, accounting, that can be transitioned into working from home. But with regards to this, the interesting part is that if you look at knowledge, there's two types, codified and tacit, or in terms of learning. I'm going to put a paradigm to everybody as well. Tacit is a knowledge that you cannot actually write in paper, or you cannot write as an SOP. For example, swimming lessons. You don't throw people into the pool after reading instructions and they don't learn. They most likely they will drown. Codified is knowledge that you can actually write down as an SOP or write down as a book, and people can learn about it. Now, there's two facets of this. In terms of the codified functions of work, that can be done from home easily, and productivity will increase. Example, if you're doing coding, if you're doing accounting work, if you're doing mathematical equation regression, that can be done in work, and productivity increased. That went over the roof, I think, in the case of this working from home scenario. But the problem is that when it comes to tacit, these are things like client interaction, building innovation in the meeting room. This is something that you have to meet in person, and it's very difficult to do this. It's very difficult to do this in a working from home manner or fashion. So that's my point of view. Basically, I think in terms of codified function of work, its productivity shoots up, but in terms of innovation development, it slightly declines. Now, in terms of moving permanently, with regards to companies, I think there has been some chatter that I'm seeing with regards to technology firms moving their functions primarily into home. I think this is mostly for the programmers or the software engineers. So I think if the industry that will lead this type of movement, it will likely start from the technology firms, and I think the rest probably will see that at a slower pace.
Mark, perhaps if you don't mind as well, to share a little bit your thinking around elastic workforce, because we've seen a number of multinationals in FTSE 100 and S&P 500 has trying to move towards that direction as well. And how does that what does that then mean for productivity, and what it also means for professional employees who are now have to work from home remotely too?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we don't overemphasize what's going to happen around work from home, because I think a lot of industries at the moment where you've got lockdowns, whether it's hotels, restaurants, travel sector, hospitality, you actually need to be on location. And so those of you who work particularly in professional circles will tend to focus very much on the work from home. There's actually a large number of people who will not be working from home. And so if you look at the stats, I would say that across the whole population, we're probably only talking about 1/3 of people who potentially could work from home further and more extensively. So I would say to those of you, particularly in professional circles, don't overplay the work from home. So that would be my sort of first key message. My second key message is one of the things that we're learning about working from home is the importance of flexibility, and how do you help people to basically take advantage of the flexibility. But I think also from a management point of view, you need to be flexible, because people are in different situations. If you have 2 parents working and with children at home, how do you help them to be able to both work and be productive at the same time? So for me, the trick here is to actually focus more on outcomes and values that are being created. And I think that one of the things that I learned through the 2008 financial crisis was the really critical thing is it's not about people working from home, it's not about the amount of hours that people do, but it's all about the outcomes. And it's all about, if you like, what people are able to drive in terms of value. And actually, I think that's very interesting, because for me, the really interesting trend that comes out of this is trust and transparency. And how do you generate that trust and that transparency in a world where you have more remote and an extended workforce? And Stephen, you asked me about the issue about sort of whether it's extended workforce, gig workforces. I think the reality is that the workforces that we are employing will be a lot more flexible and fungible going forward, not least because I think it's going to be extremely difficult for companies to actually have all the skills within its own sort of 4 walls. And so you do need to have this sort of, this notion of, I think, networking going forward. So to me, that plays into the decentralization, to the networking, to the extended workforce. And the key interesting question I have is, how do you maintain quality in your extended supply chain across a workforce, some of whom may be working for you, some of whom may be actually self-employed, and some of whom may be working for on a contractual basis? And that to me is part of the sort of the dynamic. And working from home just plays into that whole sort of, I think, scenario of the way that I see things playing out going forward.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Mark. I was saying thanks for your response, and I thought really spot on there. We've got a couple more questions, one from Zoom and one from Facebook. From Zoom, we have Wulan Kusuma from PwC, and from Facebook, I'm going to read a question from Jack Stephen from Jakarta. Wulan.
Yes, so first of all, thanks Global IPA for organizing this webcast. This is really helpful, and thank you for the speakers for your time. I think my question would be, like we were talking about how the world after COVID-19, and we were working towards on the digital economy and society after COVID-19. My question would be like, how well does Indonesia, in terms of preparing its technology infrastructure, such as internet network, 5G, affordable internet across the country, since I think after this, other than food, electricity, clean water, I think the internet will be like our primary needs.
Sure. Thanks, Wulan. And questions from Jack Stephen from Jakarta. How can executives balance between financial capital and human capital, and how to address it to their employees, perhaps around messaging? So perhaps Wulan's question keen to bring in Pak Handry to to share your thoughts as industry lead in Indonesia around Indonesia readiness, some of the technological infrastructure.
I thought Ibu Dewi will be the right person.
Yeah, I think we'll also direct Ibu Dewi too. If Ibu Dewi would like to comment, feel free, Ibu Dewi, if you have some comments to Kin. But based on your just an overall view, where we're heading, Pak Handry, around where Indonesia heading around the development.
From my side, I think we are still left behind, to be honest, in terms of this. We got quite a lot of talents, talents like you, like another 400s, you know, the GIPA members, the GIPA participants tonight. But the infrastructure is still being developed, right? The 5Gs, the 3D printing, and also the robotics and those kind of things. We need the blueprint, and that blueprint need to be provided by the government. You know, the blueprint strategy, you know, what to do with all of these new things. That's what we need. In terms of capability, well, I have my friends in Salatiga who is doing the design for 3D printing, and they are able to export the design to big companies like Ford Motors, Allied Signals, and those kind of things. So we do have some people, and we do have BPPT, BPPT, who are working on some sophisticated things. But the question is always, how do you do the upscaling capability? And that's the Indonesia have lack of capability. So again, I think, like Mark said in the beginning, this COVID will be kind of like a blessing in disguise for a country like Indonesia to accelerate that growth, because localization is needed. And if you are not able to provide, you know, ventilators in the next 9 months or 12 months, and then we will be in trouble if this, you know, this COVID continues. Because we are not only talking about Jakarta, you know, big cities, we are talking about around Indonesia, which we don't know yet what is the impact after this Hari Raya. I hope the request and the measures not to go back to the village, not to do mudik, really works. Otherwise, we will face new cases, not in the city, but in the rural areas where the health facilities is, you know, very poor. So we have something, but we need the blueprint and we need the acceleration.
Stephen, it's Mark. Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, there was an interesting announcement this week with the World Bank, the ITU, which is the International Telecoms Union, and also the GSMA, which is the Mobile Association. And what they were trying to do was actually get a recognition of the criticality of digital infrastructure, because clearly a lot of countries and a lot of people have been using more digital infrastructure as part of connecting. And they were trying to get ministers of ICT, ministers of finance, together to be able to do what Handry was saying there, which is, if you like, have a common view about the importance of criticality of digital infrastructure going forward. And I do think that there's not a real opportunity here for many countries to really think about where they are today, what the plans are going forward. 5G is obviously a complicated story because you need to look at 3G, 4G and 5G in sort of together, I think, and think a little bit about the sort of the phased rollout. But I think there are some what I see, some encouraging signs, certainly at the global level, about the importance of coordination and not leaving it just to one department, but actually looking at how you can, I think, bring people together. And I would encourage people, if they haven't seen the World Bank announcements this week, to definitely sort of look at those. And there's some good, I think, some good momentum at the moment behind the criticality of digital infrastructure.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing the global announcement. Certainly, the post-COVID-19 world are not immediately faced by individuals and organized businesses. I think governments around the world, including Indonesia, should also see what's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel and really be ready once we come out of that. And I think if the likes of Ministry of Finance and ICT really see how this can be an opportunity to accelerate the digital infrastructure with also the readiness within the private sector to support, I think that would be an amazing. And Dewi, I know you perhaps have a few remarks, comments as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to add my force with regard to the capacity and capability of Indonesia regarding the question with to Wulans. I think we have capacity and capability, but the capacity of the Indonesian people is not the same as what Pak Handry say. So I'm not sure working from home in the future, perhaps not going to, it's going to take place only for some professionals, but looking into what happens in Indonesia now, we are aware that many of Indonesians employers are informal skill. So with regard to the technology, I understand we have that capacity, we have a PPT, as Pak Handry say, but we need to have a blueprint. And this comes to next topic that next issue that I like to take up. I think a few days ago, Ministers of Labor of G20 has issued one half and a page of joint statement, and there it has the commitment by Minister of Labor and Employment of G20 to help policies in the national level. So I hope that in the globally, there have been some measure, but the challenge is always on how global commitment can be materialized or can be implemented nationally. So that's, I guess, just to jump into that discussion. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Dewi. Indeed. Certainly, this is an area that a lot of you are asking about. We also received a question from Alfar Laksana from JP Morgan in London around this digital infrastructure as well. But I think we're going to move on, unfortunately. But at least this topic is certainly is an area where a lot of interest. So probably what GIPA will do as well as a follow-up. Thanks, Mark, for the prompt around the announcement from World Bank, ITU, and GSMA. What we'll do probably to share with our partners at Ministry of Finance and Ministry of ICT around relevant and where we can support. And for those professionals who have a huge interest in the digital infrastructure space, we'll see what we could do, right? I mean, a blueprint and this type of thing is not really rocket science, we've felt, but certainly where professionals in the overseas hub can contribute, I think certainly we need to just put a call there and see what we come out with. And certainly it would be great to involve Ministry of Foreign Affairs and relevant embassies as well. Moving on in a more personal questions, perhaps, rather than macro and in industry trends. I'm keen to bring in from Zoom Fianca Kurniawan from BMW, based in the UK, and Faisal Rakun from Citigroup in the US, if that's okay.
Yep, hello, it's Bianca here, calling in from the UK. Sorry, I don't have my my camera with me, but I guess the question from me would be, what would be your number one advice for aspiring young professionals who are currently dealing with the limited demands for talents in the job market, obviously coming from someone who just jumped into the industry recently? So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bianca. Faisal, you on the line? Yeah. Oh, not yet. So yeah, I think let's. I was also reminded by Hilmi that we actually haven't answered the Jack Stephen questions around balancing the financial capital and human capital in some of the messaging. So again, I think both of the questions from Bianca and Jack Stephen really resonates around individual messaging. So why don't we respond to Bianca first, and then we'll come back to Jack Stephen. On the Bianca questions, why don't we start with Arcky, and then we'll go to Mark, if that's okay. Advice for aspiring young professionals.
Got it. Thanks for the question, Bianca. And I have to be honest, that's a tough question to somewhat answer in this type of situation. But I'm seeing some of the new professionals or new hires in the company, and also from discussing with various other colleagues in different firms. I think it still remains the same in terms of the expectations. You're communicating well in terms of your work. You're able to deliver your work, and at the same time communicate to your leadership team or your team members. I think I like to use the term over communication, and also being transparent with regards to what you do. It's always good. I think the second aspect that I think is also helpful is relating back to the point that I mentioned before. If you be proactive in terms of getting insightful information or first-hand information from the market or reports that you can see that can potentially help your team and also maybe the management team in your company. And I think something that I would say, especially for aspiring young professionals too, is in terms of skill development. For this one, I think Mark Spelman brought in a good point. Become a good storyteller. It's always good, and that requires practice. I think being able to demonstrate that skill will be really helpful as well when you're relaying information and when you're communicating with the rest of the team members.
Sure. Maybe I'll turn to Pak Handry to share a little bit of advice to the aspiring young professionals with a current challenging job market with limited demands.
Sorry, Stephen. I was distracted. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. There's a question from Bianca from BMW.
What is Bianca question again?
Yeah. So the question was, what would be your advice for aspiring young professionals who are currently faced with limited demand from for talents in the job market right now? So these are those who bring for workforce.
If you guys have the terminology of LDR, which is
long distance relationship.
Long distance relationship. I think you need to have a new terminology of LHR, which is currently you need to to have a listening skills. You know, it's a new world. The more you listen, the more you learn. When we talk about number 2 of my message before, which is redefining your winning. So probably listening and learning will be your winning. How to speak Chinese language in 3 months, probably something like that. If it is allowed, if you are allowed to do that, your time allow you to do that. So second is humility. Learn from everywhere, and have an open-minded about what's going on. And the last one is resilience. You know, guard the resilience, because as I mentioned, you know, the reality is probably not as good as what we expect. You know, and normally leaders, when they are facing crisis, we have to assume the condition will be worse than what it look like, right? With that, we will make the plan A, B, C, D. So I'm having a plan A, B, C now about, you know, how to continue doing the business in Indonesia, and try to avoid as many as possible the layoff or the cutting costs and those kind of things. So listening, humility, and resilience.
Thanks, Handry, for the LHR advice, not a LDR advice relationship, hopefully, but this is still certainly as a good overlay to your 3 key earlier messaging, Handry.
Right, Stephen and the team and everybody. I have to leave at 8:45. I'm so sorry because I got something to host at 9 o'clock. So Mark, really nice meeting you and learn from you. Arcky, you know, great person, still young. You will be the future of Indonesia. Really proud seeing you. Ibu Dewi, nice meeting you. Hilmi, as usual, you know, great arrangement. Stephen, thank you very much. Great arrangement.
Pleasure. Thank you, Handry.
Nice to meet you, Handry.
8:45.
Perhaps we'll go to Mark to comment on Jack Stevens' questions around balancing that financial capital and human capital, and how do you go about it with your employees and workforce?
Yeah, and I'd also like to just sort of one quick thought for Bianca as well, which would be think about one piece of advice I got was always try and think what it is that if you're going to act like your boss or act like you're actually at the next level, what's the delta between what you're doing now and what you could be doing at the next level? And I think without obviously being arrogant, but I always think it's what you're trying to always demonstrate is that you can, that comes back to my potential, you can operate at the next level. So to go to the question about financial capital and human capital, I think the first observation that I would make is I would like to look at your training budgets in your firm, and all the evidence in most companies is that despite all the change, all the disruption, actually training budgets have been are either flat or have been going down, and that says to me that we haven't actually got the strategies right around human capital. As well as we should have done. So my first question to you would be, if we look at our sort of human capital and our talent strategies, have we really thought through, I think, the sort of the life cycle of talent and how it is that we're trying to sort of drive and move our talent forward? And that's basically that's about how do we attract our talent, how do we develop our talent, how do we retain it over time, and how do we sort of move it forward? And it seems to me that we are going to have some big challenges coming out of the COVID-19 with that whole question about how do we develop our talent over time. And that would be my sort of first key message. I would worry about making false distinctions between financial capital and human capital, because I think it's increasingly an and story, not an or story. Because all of the messages that I want to give is that if you overweight technology or overweight financial capital and underweight human capital, I think you'll see what we're seeing in a lot of countries is the fact that actually productivity hasn't gone up. And that is because we haven't got the balance right between those sorts of key dimensions. Yes, there is quite a lot of evidence that the returns on investment, particularly in digital, have not delivered. But I think I would sort of say is what we actually need to do is step back, think very, very carefully about where we are, how do we optimize our financial resources, because I think that will vary a lot depending on the industry that you're in, but how do we also optimize our human capital? And I think it's an and story, not an or story. And I'll stop there, Stephen, because I'm conscious that we've also sort of time's marching on. But it's an interesting question. Yeah. But I think what I would encourage everybody to think about is what's the problem beneath that question that you're really trying to get at? And I think that will lead you into some very interesting sort of thoughts about how you're using your resources, whether they're financial or human capital.
Sure. Thanks, Mark, for sharing that. Certainly is an interesting question that should really be explored further, because you could really see from different angles there. I mean, unfortunately, we're coming almost to the end of the Q&A session. It's been very, I mean, I know there are still a lot of questions coming through Zoom and FB, Facebook Live. So thanks for those for activity. What I'll do, I'll probably share it to the speakers, and we'll try to get back to you. But sorry, we cannot squeeze all questions into one. But we have one last more question that we're going to take from Faisal Rakun, who works at Citigroup in the US. Faisal, do you want to share your brief question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for everyone to having this kind of meeting. This is really my first time. So it's been really an eye-opening session. So I would like to ask to the panelists, what do you guys think about the commentary that some jobs are gone for good due to automation? Is this something that can be mitigated by our governments wherever we are? And is it time for US, UK, specifically, and the world as a whole to talk about universal basic income?
Shall we just go quickly to Arcky and then we'll go to Mark?
Sure. So I think I can answer the commentary in jobs. I think with the rise of artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on, and this is also a purview of something that I do closely. I don't think that jobs will disappear. It will actually augment jobs. So some functions will definitely move around. Things that are normally done by human, like manual type of work, can be replaced. Example would be similar on fraud detection, credit decisioning. This is in terms of financial institution. So the jobs that will disappear is the manual paperwork type of job, but it's a pretty normal practice that when there's a new technology coming in, people will be shifted to a different paradigm of.
Is it just me? But Arcky, I think you just froze.
Arcky froze. I think we can.
Oh, sorry. Did I froze just now?
Just now, yeah.
Okay. Did I miss the answer? Okay. So let me just try to repeat myself quickly. In terms of artificial intelligence, robotics, it will displace some jobs, but it will ultimately augment jobs. There will be some new job function that will be created with regards to this emerging type of new functions. And ultimately, it can be both between high skilled, where you require more data scientists, you require more engineers. In terms of low aspects, in terms of the low skill type, there will be some breakouts that will be developed as well with regards to the creation of artificial intelligence and also robotics. So I wouldn't say it's going to diminish jobs. It will complement jobs.
Sure. And this is an area that World Economic Forum really excel at, and I know you have a lot of thinking, and certainly having an hour keynote from you on this would not be sufficient, but just brief thought and perspective on you on this excellent question.
Yeah, Faisal, thank you for that question. I think what I would encourage you, certainly some jobs are clearly going to go, but actually one of the points I made up front was that it's not about whether a whole job is always going to go, but about how the nature of the job is actually going to sort of change. And I think we've over-focused on this question about what jobs are going to go. I do think a lot of jobs are going to get sort of created. Clearly, there's a problem, which is you can't make a forklift truck driver automatically a data scientist. And so you have to think quite carefully about which jobs go, what does that mean, and which jobs are going to get created. But I would really encourage people to think about the components of jobs and how that's going to change. And I thought Arcky made an excellent point. Every time you use the word automation, you have to use the word augmentation. Because if you think automation and you don't think augmentation, you're not thinking, I think, enough about how the nature of, if you like, the human interaction with the machine is really coming together. So I think I'll leave it at that. I really do think it's about how you decompose jobs, and it's about automation and augmentation. Let me just make the point about universal income, because that has come up a lot recently. And in many ways, people are arguing that the big sort of government fiscal initiatives are in some ways a surrogate for universal basic income. it's interesting that if you look before 2020 at the experiments, particularly the one that was done in Finland, actually they had 2,000 people and they stopped it. And the reason why I think they stopped it is because of the problems of entitlement and behaviors. And to me, the key issue is, if you are going to go down the route of universal basic income, I think you need to think very, very, very carefully about what does that mean for entitlement and what does it mean around behaviors. So it's not that I'm anti-universal basic income, but I think there's a lot more work required, because I am very concerned about the unintended consequences of if we go down that road without thinking about a holistic approach to how we address it and how we implement it well. So I'm very sort of cautious about it. I think it's a danger of being seen as a silver bullet, but I think it has potentially lots of unintended consequences.
Thanks, Mark. To that end, we will now move on to the closing session, but we are pleased and privileged to be hearing great insights and perspective from our speakers. So thank you to Mark, to Arcky, and also to Handry. Now we have Dewi Wahab, the Special Advisor to Indonesia's Foreign Minister, to say a few words for closing remarks. Dewi?
Thank you, Stephen. First of all, I would like to congratulate you and GIPA for convening this discussion. I think it's very wonderful. And thank you so much for the speakers. You have given us a great insight. And of course, thank you to young professionals who attended and listening to this discussion. So I guess my remarks will be directed to GIPA itself. From the discussion, GIPA can actually rise to this challenge. Mark has mentioned about leadership. Mark said about resilience. Mark said about how to make you relevant to this context. And also, these challenges always comes with an opportunity. So I guess GIPA can rise to this challenge, because GIPA can perhaps can be a part of the solutions. With membership of young professionals, you've seen many problems faced by young professionals. For example, like what Bianca mentions, if GIPA can somewhere along the line help those young professionals, because they need to be advised, or to be an opportunity, or get information whether a job can be found or something. I don't know how, like what Mas Arcky did with the survey. I think what he said about cohesiveness of the Indonesian community, I think is a very positive. So that's why for GIPA can actually communicate and keep contact and make network and be a part of solution to the young professional, because these young professionals need some collaborations, and only through collaboration we can rise to this challenge. So I guess to the young professional who listening to this discussion, again, this is a time for resilience. It's always, there is always opportunity. Innovation, Arcky mentioned, it's going to go down a little bit, but I think if we can collaborate all together under GIPA leadership, again, GIPA can rise to this challenge, show its leadership, be a part of solution. So perhaps you can collaborate together and work together, so can support the young professional. So thank you again, Stephen. Thank you, Mas Hilmi, for the excellent arrangement. Thank you all the speakers, and also many thanks for the young professional who listen and participate in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dewi, for your remarks, and it was very encouraging that Minister of Foreign Affairs opens door for contribution from professionals and executives from all across G20 and ASEAN. Together we could do it and try to seize opportunities that always come out, in particular what sort of actions that all of us need to be thinking today in order to prepare ourselves to the post-COVID-19 world. I mean, I know AMF has predicted that the world will bounce back in 2021. It sounds quite a long way away, but individuals level, your departments, your businesses, organization should really be thinking today what sort of actions you want to be taking at an individual level personally, how you would influence others, what sort of plan are you going to make. And I think it's wonderful. And perhaps I also want to say a big thank you, and a special thank you perhaps to you, Dewi, on your personal support, as well as support from continued support from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, in connecting GIPA to wide range of missions and people all around the globe. We every day we are always impressed the profiles of professional leaders we met in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Saudi Arabia, and APAC, and all across. And I feel if we get all professional hubs eventually up and running, not just in specific major cities around these key markets, I think that would be really wonderful. And again, I think certainly your words of encouragement from GIPA's role going forward is certainly something that we will take on board. I think we're certainly very open and be looking forward to collaborating in the future. Again, I think this is also perhaps call to action. So a lot of our wider membership around ways we can try to integrate us in these uncertain times. To that end, I think perhaps this is also perhaps the last call to action for professionals who are working abroad, but you're not yet connected to your professional hub. I would encourage you to get in touch with us, because GIPA would be more than happy to connect you to the nearest professional hubs, or we are working every day to support the establishment of different professional hubs out there. So we are your man, or Hilmi is your man. Please do get in touch with him. Or if you're on Facebook, there is Stephen Vijay as well, our Secretary General. So certainly we'll be supporting you. We have our upcoming Global Connect series on the 16th of May. After we're looking at the future of the workforce impact post-COVID-19 world, we are going to look at today what has been done in terms of policy responses and global financial stimulus has been done today. We were going to have the global chief economist of Bloomberg, Tom Orlik. We're going to have the chairman of OMFIF and emeritus professor at London Stock Exchange, Lord Desai, who is a leading thinkers in the space. And I think it will be really good to hearing their global insights. Again, Global Connect series aiming to provide a latest global and leading industry insights to Indonesians back home and overseas. To that end, thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand over quickly to Hilmi.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our session. Thank you for the wonderful insights to our speakers. Thank you for the inspiring remarks, Ibu Dewi. Now, everyone, please stay connected at GIPA_ID. I repeat, GIPA_ID on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're more than happy to hear your thoughts, connect with you. My personal line is 0811-888-1558 as well. Wijaya is also on Facebook. Do reach out to any of us. We'll be more than happy to welcome you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Goodbye now.
Bye. Thank you, Pak Steven.
Thank you.